The crowd was already screaming before the women even stepped into the arena. Bloodthirsty voices echoed through the amphitheater in Carthage, blending with the cries of a newborn baby, just separated from his mother. A slave woman, barely recovered from childbirth, was being marched toward death. Her crime? Refusing to renounce a forbidden faith. And beside her walked a Roman noblewoman, young and educated, with everything to live for. This is the story of Perpetua and Felicitas, two mothers whose executions shocked even the jaded citizens of the Roman Empire. What makes their story unforgettable isn't just the brutal way they died, but how they lived in defiance of everything expected of them. Perpetua, a Roman aristocrat; Felicitas, her personal slave. In any other moment of history, they would never have stood side by side, but in March of the year 203, they died together, united by their shared faith in Christianity. Perpetua was born around 180 CE, in Thuburbo-Minas, near Carthage, modern-day Tunisia. She came from a wealthy family, had received a full education, and was married with a young child. In every way she embodied the Roman ideal of a privileged woman, respectable, secure, and destined for a long, quiet life. Felicitas was her opposite in every way. A household slave, pregnant, voiceless, and entirely under the ownership of another human being. Yet the two would become sisters not by blood, but by belief. The reason? Christianity. At the time, it was illegal to convert to either Judaism or Christianity, and Emperor Septimius Severus had ordered new waves of persecution across North Africa. Converts were hunted, arrested, and punished severely. Perpetua, just 22 years old, was arrested with a group of fellow Christians known as catechumens, those preparing for baptism. Felicitas, though pregnant and enslaved, was arrested alongside her. Their story is remarkable not only because of what happened, but because we know what they were thinking. Perpetua kept a diary from prison, a first-person account that survives as one of the earliest known texts, written by a Christian woman. Her words provide a rare window into the emotional and spiritual world of a young mother preparing to die. From the darkness of a Roman prison, she wrote with clarity and purpose. "I was tormented with worry for my baby," she said, and her baby, just months old, was still nursing. Her father visited her constantly, begging her to renounce Christianity and come home, for the sake of her child. "He threw himself down before me," she wrote, tearing at his beard and casting himself on the ground, cursing his years, and speaking words that would move any creature. Her love for her child was deep, but so was her faith. Eventually, the guards allowed her to keep the baby with her in prison. "It became to me a palace," she wrote, "so that I preferred being there to anywhere else." Meanwhile, Felicitas faced a separate torment. Roman law forbade the execution of pregnant women. If she gave birth too late, her death would be postponed, and she would die alone, without her companions. She didn't want to live longer. She wanted to die with them. 2 days before the scheduled execution, she went into labor. Inside the prison, she gave birth to a daughter. When a guard mocked her pain, asking how she'd handle wild beasts if she couldn't handle childbirth, she answered calmly, "Now it is I who suffer, but then another will be in me, who will suffer for me." Her words shook the guard into silence. Both babies, Perpetua's and Felicitas's, were given to trusted Christian women to raise. And with that, the two mothers prepared for the end. The night before their execution, the prisoners were offered a final meal, what Romans called the cena libera, a last supper for the condemned. It was supposed to be a solemn, almost ritualistic gesture, but Perpetua, Felicitas, and their companions transformed it into something else entirely. Instead of weeping or dreading what lay ahead, they turned the banquet into a celebration of faith. They spoke openly, joyfully even, about the judgment of God and the hope of heaven. The crowd who came to watch them eat expected fear, but what they saw was a kind of defiance they couldn't understand. These were people unafraid of death, people at peace with their fate, and it unsettled the spectator. March 7, 203. The amphitheater in Carthage was packed. The games had been organized to honor the birthday of the emperor's son. Perpetua, Felicitas, and their fellow Christians were marched out under the bright North African sun. They didn't walk like prisoners. According to one eyewitness, they walked with radiant faces, not trembling, not looking to the ground, but with serenity. Perpetua was described as glowing, calm, like someone walking into a sacred ceremony. Felicitas, who had just given birth days earlier, looked proud and joyful. She had made it in time to face martyrdom, alongside her sisters and brothers in faith. The men in the group Revocatus Saturninus and Secundulus were assigned to face wild beasts, a boar, a leopard, and a bear. The women were given something crueler. Perpetua and Felicitas were sent to face a wild cow, a deliberate insult. The cow was associated with the goddess Juno, a Roman deity venerated by respectable women. Making Perpetua and Felicitas face a sacred animal in the public arena wasn't just meant to kill them. Before the games began, the Roman guards made one last attempt to force the Christians into a symbolic act of submission. They ordered the men to wear robes of Saturn's priests, and the women to dress as priestesses of Ceres' pagan gods, tied to the empire. But Perpetua refused. She spoke clearly and firmly. "We came here of our own free will so that our freedom would not be violated. We gave our lives to avoid doing such things." Her words struck even the guards. The tribune allowed them to go into the arena without the ritual clothing. It was a small concession, but a meaningful one. What followed was Roman cruelty at its most theatrical. The men were released into the arena first, attacked by the beasts, and eventually finished off by gladiators. Then came the women. Perpetua and Felicitas were stripped down and placed into nets, then exposed to the wild cow. The sight shocked even the jaded crowd. Felicitas's body still bore the signs of recent childbirth. Her breasts leaked milk as she was thrown to the ground. Perpetua, a noblewoman, had her clothes torn as she was flung into the air. It was so indecent, so brutal, that the crowd, accustomed to blood, demanded the women be covered. The guards dressed them in tunics and brought them back out. Perpetua had been injured. When she hit the ground, her clothing had torn along the thigh. But even in that moment, she reached down and covered herself, not out of vanity, but modesty. She didn't scream or run. She looked around, noticed Felicitas still on the ground, and extended her hand. The two women stood again, side by side, still alive. They had survived the first assault, but the arena demanded more blood. The crowd called for the final act. The group was moved to the Sana Vivaria gate, where gladiators were stationed to deliver the death blows. As they waited, they exchanged the kiss of peace, a ritual among early Christians symbolizing equality, forgiveness, and unity. It was a striking image, a noblewoman and a slave, two mothers embracing as equals in a world that refused to see them that way. Perpetua seemed dazed. She asked aloud when the cow would come, not realizing the beast had already attacked her. When she saw her torn clothes and felt the pain in her body, she understood. Then came the execution. One by one, the gladiators moved forward. When the sword came for Perpetua, the young executioner's hand shook. His first blow landed on her bones, causing a scream of pain. But Perpetua remained steady. She reached for his hand, guided the blade to her throat, and allowed him to end it. The eyewitness who completed her diary wrote, "Perhaps such a woman, feared by the unclean spirit, could not be killed unless she herself willed it." The deaths of Perpetua and Felicitas didn't fade into obscurity like so many other executions in the Roman arenas. Instead, their stories spread like wildfire through early Christian communities across North Africa and beyond. Their martyrdom was not just remembered, it was revered. 2 centuries later, none other than St. Augustine would deliver annual sermons in Carthage on the anniversary of their deaths, March 7th. That date became their official feast day, a sacred entry in the Christian liturgical calendar that remains to this day. What makes their story so powerful isn't just the brutality they endured. It's the complete reversal of everything Roman society held sacred. In a culture obsessed with hierarchy, order, and tradition, These two women shattered expectations. Perpetua, a woman of noble blood, should have lived a life of comfort and privilege. Felicitas, a slave, was supposed to remain invisible, voiceless, and powerless. Yet their shared faith in a forbidden religion brought them together as equals. They were baptized, imprisoned, and martyred not as noble and slave, but as sisters, equal before God, equal in courage, and equal in sacrifice. Even more remarkable is the fact that we know all this through Perpetua's own words, in an era when women were barely allowed to speak publicly, let alone write. Perpetua composed a first-hand account of her journey from arrest to the edge of execution. Her prison diary is one of the oldest surviving texts by a Christian woman, and possibly one of the earliest female documents in all of Western history. Through her writing, she didn't just describe her pain. She took control of her story. She turned her suffering into testimony. Her voice, firm and unwavering, still speaks across nearly 2,000 years. For the early Christians persecuted, powerless, and scattered, this story became a symbol of something bigger. Rome promised safety in exchange for conformity. The empire demanded worship, obedience, and allegiance to its gods. But here were two women who said no. They rejected the empire's terms. They faced the beasts, the swords, and the sneers of the crowd, and they didn't back down. Their final kiss of peace wasn't just a ritual, it was a declaration. They had already won the moment they stepped into the arena. There's also a bitter irony to how they died. Roman society valued women for their roles as mothers and caretakers, as vessels for family honor and lineage. Yet Perpetua and Felicitas chose to give up everything, even their babies, not because they lacked love, but because they believed in something higher. That choice, one of the most difficult a mother could make, wasn't born out of selfishness. It was rooted in a profound conviction that their sacrifice had meaning beyond this life. Their bodies, bruised and broken in front of cheering crowds, became symbols of a deeper power, one that would outlast the empire itself. The same Rome that tried to erase them would, within a few centuries, become the heart of the Christian world. And stories like theirs were part of what made that transformation possible. Today, nearly 2 millennia later, Perpetua and Felicitas are remembered, not just for how they died, but for how they lived with conviction, clarity, and courage. Their legacy isn't just carved in church calendars or recited in sermons. It lives in every act of quiet defiance against injustice, in every woman who dares to speak her truth, and in every community that chooses unity over division. If this story moved you, and you want to hear more powerful accounts of faith, resistance, and transformation, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell so you never miss a story. And in the comments, let us know which historical figure or forgotten hero you want us to explore next. Until next time.